Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Robyn. How are you? I feel bad. I always have tried to think that will come up with some sort of cool opening so it's not so jarring. And I keep thinking I'll try to like beg, Martini Glambassador, the lady who does our cool tabs gifs, to come up with something. But I'm actually going to come up with some kind of cool opening, so it won't just be like this. So,
Yes.
but you never seem to.
Surprise. Um,
It always looks great with you. So, to
yes,
kick this off
this
today
is my
about.
Jack Nicholson in The Witches of Eastwick look today.
Oh my
Yeah,
God!
that's
Yes.
what I'm going for. It's like a St. Patrick's Day Jack Nicholson
No. Yeah.
thing, I guess.
I got my corned beef from New Seasons this morning, so I'm already prepared. But that's this coming.
Oh, I know, but like you celebrate on the weekend. I don't technically celebrate because I don't like crowds, but I still like festive accoutrement. Um, I yeah, and also I look really good in this color, so
I think you do look good in green. It's a supervillain color often, but it
yeah.
works for you. You are not.
But I am a super villain, is the thing. I'm not like some mediocre villain. I'm a super villain.
Yes, I once wrote something where I mentioned that green is often a supervillain color, and despite having often, there was a lot of men with their opinions list felt it necessary to list in like AP Club responses, like heroes
Oh,
who were green, and like it was a whole thing. But that brings
yeah.
us to sort of.
Robin Hood, my
Yes,
namesake, sort
there
of.
we go. People feeling like having that they feel like they have to censor themselves because they are jerks. There was an article in the Times
Oh,
about
yeah.
this, and then I think yet another one in the Atlantic of just I have to really second guess what I write, or I might face career setbacks because consequences. It
Yeah.
is the great dilemma of frankly a lot of entitled people is that there are consequences towards their actions. Um, can you? What are your thoughts about this self censorship? Because for me, it was just like that's what. If I learned anything from college or even my 20s, it was to think about what I was saying, so I wasn't a jerk.
Yeah. I have to self-censor constantly, and not even because I'm going to be a jerk, but because like I have really bad ADD and really want to go off topic all of the time. So, yes, I have to self censor sometimes. Everyone has to self censor sometimes. It's called being a human in the world with other people. I don't usually have the urge to insult people, but like I get that other people do. Um, you know, hey, I can't go, maybe you can't insult people. I can't start talking about false Dimitris out of nowhere.
It's like it's a reasonable expectation. What's interesting is if for anyone who read the Times piece, it was a college student. Well, again, I don't know why the Times. It's not so much how did
It's fraught with
the
this narrative, like this Barry
yes,
Weiss
but
nonsense narrative.
this lady gets this young person gets this op-ed piece in the Times at a period where there are no articles about, well, what if you're a minority student and they're no longer talking about race in
Yeah,
school or talking about all this sort of stuff, or there's like teachers who literally laws that could potentially lead to their being terminated and fired, and instead it's the same as if nothing else has changed. So it's just curious news judgment that the Times would think this person needs this, but it's the Barry Weiss beat, right? Somehow the idea of like, oh no, I'm being persecuted. What I found fascinating was that I've known people who actually are at their hearts decent people. They don't aren't able to register social cues. They aren't able to read people. So
yeah,
they're often like they come across as jerks, and you see how this affects I've in my
yeah,
youth I saw how this affected certain people personally and professionally. It was like, of course you're going to get fired, of course you're going to not have friends, people aren't going to want
yeah,
to hang out with you, and you're a kind of at your core a shirt off your back type person, but you're still someone who just pisses everyone off. And I feel bad for those people. But this lady, she's describing it where she
Depends on like if it's like a genuine cognitive thing. I hate the thing where people, and you hear this less and less, but you'd hear people go, "Oh well, he's an asshole," but when you get down to it, like he's a really good guy.
no,
And those, like, I hate those people. I'm sorry, I hate them. I will
no,
run like the hills.
I
And
certainly get that point, and I'm not necessarily assuming that it's always a neurotypical issue or something.
yeah,
Though, you know, a friend had commented on this of like there was still a period where I don't know if you ever watched The Big Bang Theory. I didn't watch it very much, but
I didn't.
like a lot of people there was this assumption that socially awkward white, specifically white men, are inherently geniuses. So your kid,
Yeah,
when you're like 8 or 9, has clear behavioral issues. They're then taken to a class of other geniuses like them. And, they could be bright, but essentially it's just they go from now for the next 10 to 12 years of their lives with people saying, oh, it's okay that you're a jerk. You're brilliant, kind of what you were saying. And
yeah.
then never taking the time to
Although in
try.
my experience, it was usually, oh, like you're so punk rock, so it's okay. Um,
No one was taking the time to actually help them and lead. And I had to learn to pick. I mean, which is not. I don't know how much of this is innate. I think a lot of it is about learning to be a person, learning
yeah.
about social cues, learning to read people, learning when you're oh, I'm kind of boring this I'm not
Mhm.
like conversation. Maybe I should do this. Maybe life is constant self censorship.
Yeah.
I don't
I
necessarily
can't sing literally all the time. And I used to do that, and it really annoyed people. And
yeah.
I have since stopped.
It is, I people might used to refer to it as my own sort of neuroses of my being very aware of certain things.
Mhm.
Mom and I were that way of like, oh, maybe this is happening. But this person's op-ed, once again, was what struck me was she seemed to have understood. It was like I noticed that my classmates were like, she noticed by their body language, by their movements and their
Yes.
reactions. They were very uncomfortable with what she was saying. So to me, it was as if I'm addressing a group of women and it's clear I'm making them uncomfortable, or I'm talking about abortion and I think I might be making a
Mhm.
point, but it's offending them. And I notice it. And instead of being, oh, maybe I should talk to this person or do something, or figure out how I'm communicating poorly and be respectful of that, it is
Mhm.
instead of like, oh, it's their fault that they're making me have to censor myself. And the times, and I think all the people who on the right who grabbed onto this and talked about, you know, we're essentially not doing her any favors. It's
Yeah.
basically, and I've always argued this is Trumpism at its core. It's sort of the voice in your head that's like, should I really do this? Devil on your side is like, yes, you should. And that's right. And they're wrong.
Yes.
And so that to me seemed unfortunate because what could be the learning process, like at the Times had just laughed at her and not published her article. If other people had said, well,
Yeah.
just learn social cues. That's the um and because also easy argument, if I'm in a group, either of us are in a group separately, and we just have the easy argument is going, the one that everyone agrees with. So, 20 so years ago, when you were opposing the Iraq war, I'm sure to say, yes, let's go in there, weapons mass destruction is an easy argument. Most
Yeah.
people were going to be like, yeah, let's America, pay flag
And if
pins.
you were doing that, you were stupid and not serious and, annoying everyone, really.
and, and for those of us who've made contrarian arguments, it's like, well, yes, it's you're going to have to be able to make that argument well, and you're going to be able
Mhm.
to understand that you have a particularly hostile argument, and that's the way where it almost connects with the arts in the sense of comedy, right?
Mhm.
There's this belief that that this lady, I'd love to ask her or anyone who writes these pity pieces for college students, it's like, in your mind, do you think that like when Malcolm X or Muhammad Ali, or especially James Baldwin, would go to a college campus, predominantly white kids, and it's like, here's my, black SF commentary, that they're like, oh wow, brilliant. It, that it was not a fact that they were making a compelling argument, that despite a crowd more inclined to disagree with them, were able to be like, oh, I see that point, or even not to be accepting that you're going to like have a hostile argument. I just think they believe that somehow they don't have to actually make a good argument.
Well, I think what they like, the title of her thing was, I came to college to debate. No one wants anyone to go anywhere to debate. Like no one wants that. Other people came to college to eat ramen and get through shit and, have some fun. No one's, there's a very small amount of people who are like, man, I want to debate other people. For some reason, it seems like they all date my sister, and then want to debate me. Sorry, I'm like all over the place today. And or my friends, and they're like, oh, I really want to debate her. That's horrifying and bad, and I don't like it. It's an unpleasant way to be. Like, discussing things is cool. Yes. Debating things is like, fine if you're having like an official like debate, but I don't want to like do that all night. That's exhausting. That's work that other people have to put in.
And I think you raised a good point, because that word, it always pops out to me, because we discuss things, we don't always agree on certain things. The goal is that we're sharing ideas. And I think debate at its core, especially I think as it's interpreted by the modern right, is about dominance. You'd written about this a few years ago when Ben Shapiro was trying to egg on, for his own glorification, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to a debate. Now, obviously, we all understood that he doesn't respect her. He doesn't respect her opinions. The goal was, I want to get you here and humiliate you. I don't want to understand your point of view. I want to have a sense of like,
he wants to like have like the Ben Shapiro totally owns AOC in a debate YouTube thing. Like,
which is of course easy if your goal is to, well, especially when he's not human. There was like a period going around where he was a debate or sort of discussion with a trans woman, and he kept misgendering her and kept provoking her, and then she literally put her hand on him to stop him or something like that, and he like freaked out and wanted to like almost press charges or something, because he's a bully. That's his whole goal. That's what he's not. So it's essentially, debate means I want to prove you're wrong. If you're going into something being, I don't want to hear your point of view and make a case for my point of view, maybe without the assumption I'm changing your mind, but I'm essentially going to dominate you. No one, as you said, no one wants that. And no one wants debates that are about their right to exist. So, I don't necessarily think that, say, you'd be interested in debate with some rabbit here's why that Texas abortion law is good. It's like, I'm not interested.
I mean, there's a reason why, thankfully, scientists stopped debating creationists, and it was because it was legitimizing their arguments, and that's why they always wanted to debate. People with bad ideas really want to debate those ideas. No one who's like, I have fantastic ideas is like, what I really want to do is debate other people about my ideas that are good and not terrible. Like that is not that interesting, honestly.
And there's a whole thing about this on social media and others of like, you should have college, when Ann Coulter or Ben Shapiro or Milo, was like, let's have him at a college campus, and people were like, well, no. And it's like, oh, heckler's veto and shutting down. It's like, well, these people should not. What is the actual educational value? Because it's not as if as well invite Andrew
They're
Dice.
Just there to like go and say shitty things. Like, they're not educating anyone.
And they're not in a position, they're not designed to try to make of an argument or whatever. I think Rush Limbaugh, I believe, spoke to our call, but it's structured where he, and this was known about him very early on his show. It was all very um coordinated, so that he never had angry callers engaging him. And
Oh yeah.
when he would speak
It was
places, it
always
was
like
like,
big dittos, Rush.
yeah, he couldn't, to the point
I'm
where
sorry that I know that.
did to the point where, I mean, he was, when he was on David Letterman, I think in 92 or 93, Letterman like crushed him, not even about trying, because he's a sort of a very shallow bully. So that type of thing is like, I'm just going to sit up here and just be a bully for a crowd of
Yeah.
people who agree with me. Nothing they say is designed for actual liberals, whatever. So then, what is the educational value? College shouldn't be and that's what conservatives say. College shouldn't be about coming and having your ideas reinforced. So why do you need Ben Shapiro to come there and just tell you stuff that's not, at all?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, there is no educational value to these people. There's shock value, and basically what they want is to keep shocking people until people are like, that's like a poke. Like it's about inuring people to like terrible things. As far as like debate girl goes, manners exist for a reason. Like it's not, and they have always existed. I'm not talking about like, oh, like proper lady, or cross your like legs at the ankles or whatever. I don't do that. But like actual manners where you care about how whether or not other people are comfortable. And there are protocols designed to make things less socially awkward. That's why they exist. So
yeah,
if you're like, I just want to come in here and insult people and tell them that they are stupid, and then they don't like me, I don't understand why that is. But like, no, we already know that. Like that has been well established that it's not,
yeah.
something
It's
that goes over well with
the
people.
idea that wokeness or cancel culture, so essentially things
Yeah.
that came from the Black community 20 years ago, that
Yeah.
a sister created manners,
Yeah.
would be a surprise probably to Queen Elizabeth, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, everyone just said whatever was on their
Yeah.
mind, and you took
Which
it.
is not even sort of true. There's never been that period. Like there's,
It's just absurd. But I think also there was a point, and I think this is part of the modern GOP. Trump got a lot of credit for this, right? The credit of the idea of somehow cruelty is honesty, but
yeah.
it's not. Like, if you have to tell the truth, you're being honest. And so that was his, I have no time for political correctness, was his answer when confronted about saying awful things about women, which deep down in people responding of like, oh, I guess it's true that Rosie O'Donnell is a repulsive fat human being. So when he said that, that is true, but it's not. That's like, it's not a truism that he expressed. He was actually being cruel. But people seem
Yeah.
to have this idea that, oh yeah, that's somehow,
I tell it like it is. I'm
yeah,
just saying, anytime anyone is just saying what everyone else is thinking, they're usually not. They're usually just saying what they think and are being an asshole about it.
yeah. If someone commented on Twitter how to a thread I'd had about this, about how the movie Liar Liar presented that with the idea of like,
Yeah.
Carrie's character can only tell the truth and he's like a jerk to people, and it's like, well, actually you can tell the truth and not
Yeah.
be
I
cruel.
have not ever seen that movie.
I I have not either. All you
Oh,
need
okay, good. I'm like, I
is
feel like I'm like
a trailer.
pop culturally deficient with you a lot. Like I don't know all of these things, but that makes me feel a little better.
Now,
Um,
I was aware of it because it came out during a period where I was supposed to be aware of all movies or whatever. But the premise being he can only tell the truth,
yeah,
and it and I have a very good friend. My very good friend Katie is very good at telling the truth without being cruel. You don't have, if someone cooks a
yeah,
terrible dinner, you can say, "Oh, thank you for your effort," or there are things you can say without saying, "Oh, this was the worst crap I've ever had."
yeah,
You could just be, "Oh, Steve, thank you for having us over and making this," because that is true. There are ways to, oh, how do you what do you think of that outfit you're wearing? Like things that you can say without being a bad person. And also, as I already said, um, the type of person who stands by it. So it's not like the person who says, gee, Stephen, that having a beard is a great idea. And then later be like, oh my God, you see him? He's in the beard. It's ridiculous. That's not being nice. That's being
Yeah, no, that's
two-faced.
cruel. I would never tell someone that, they looked good in jeans they did not look good in. You don't let people leave the house like that. But once they've left the house,
No, you don't. If someone
you
asks for,
don't bring it up.
and there are ways to say this without hurting someone's feelings. There are
Yeah.
ways to be a person in the world, and respectful of others. And I just think that's part of growing up. And so when idea of like, oh, I have to watch, right? Because what happens is you just wind up becoming, and it's never been challenged. So I think what's
Mhm.
happened, we have like a whole group of people who for whom it's never been challenged. And that brings us, you know, the family watched the new movie Turning Red. My son had been heavily advertised, was very excited
Yeah,
about it. He loved it. I enjoyed it as well, but it was
I
somewhat
have not seen it. But yeah.
it's became somewhat controversial because a film critic, Cinema Blend, I believe, had just offensively stated that this film was essentially the lady who created it. It was just for her and her friends. This is a woman who's of Asian descent, and the lead is Asian, and it's very there
Yeah,
are and of Asian descent, and there are women. It's wonderful in the sense of it. You really see young girls as friends, not frenemies.
yeah,
They are very passionate about boy bands of 20 years ago. I mean, that's a very big part of
yeah,
which, as someone who has watched so many, I mean, if you've seen the work of Cameron Crowe or any of okay, well, these are guys into music that I'm not necessarily into, but
mhm,
I empathize with. They are passionate about something. I don't need to
yeah,
like this to get the point is that they are passionate about it. They want to get tickets to this.
yeah,
That's important to them. That's enough. But for him, it somehow wasn't. And look, everyone, you don't have to like everything, but what came up from this review were a few things. One, how men have become, especially white men, are sort of the gatekeepers of culture and success. So
mhm,
it's not so much to, and they don't frame it as in this isn't for me. They say this is too limiting. This is only, as they said, this is only
yeah.
for, and this is only, and so
Well,
if
because if things are sorry, white men are supposed to be universal is basically their thing. Like everyone can relate to me and my issues, but I can't be expected to relate to an Asian woman. That's ridiculous. Her experiences are specific, mine are general and neutral.
so someone who can't get that this pretty good film about a young Canadian Asian woman is universal with like even some teen
Mhm.
wolf thrown in, and essentially as the creator said is a coming of age story.
Yeah,
And this critic, I'm sure if you pressed him, would say, did you like Catcher in the Rye? Because when I read it, I was kind of like, am I supposed to empathize with his plight? But I guess I
yeah,
am. My job was to, even though it was not my own experience. So a lot of
yeah.
somebody asked me, it's like, am I supposed to get what's this going on? All right, but it's not expected. And that has become how
Mhm.
it's taught, or even, God forbid, when I was in school in the 90s, if you were a girl, or a young woman, like you could not express in a film class, film group of like, yeah, I mean, I don't get Clockwork Orange. Why should I? You were not, you were, that
Oh,
was not,
people.
you could not like that and be an educated film person. And you couldn't just be like, maybe that's just for weird guys who are going through
I
some.
did not like A Clockwork Orange, and I said so. And people were like, "Oh, well, guess you're not an intellectual then." I'm like, "Guess what? I don't like seeing people be raped. Like, that's not really not super it for me. Like, I'm actually not that into like I. There's some Stanley Kubrick I like, but by and large, I don't actually care that much about Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah,
Like,
and
really hated Paths of Glory.
it's fine. I think what happened was that it is like there's no realm of like, oh well, and I've been this way in film, it's like a guy who's dismissive. Like, you have a whole thing of
Mhm.
chicklet or
Yeah,
girlfriend that is inherently lesser. unless
Well, anything that's for women is inherently lesser,
yeah.
is
And
usually the way it goes.
I think the boy band aspect of the early, of 20 years ago, boy band aspect that's part of this film is another thing this guy was
Yeah.
attacking without getting look, young girls out there people really liked this music. And they had close, as the film documents, close personal, people get together like, oh, we love this or whatever. You don't have to like the music to appreciate young people being really into something. And that actually made me think of the whole kind of, I was unaware of, but I was aware of at the time, the sort of understated misogyny behind so a lot of the of Beatles critical. The idea was that once they were no longer, everyone would always tell you, oh, just listen to the later stuff, and it's no
Yeah.
longer screaming.
Oh, that is a really good point.
The screaming girls, none of that. You don't want that. It's only the later stuff where
That
John.
men could appreciate more.
That's the art.
Oh, that was an interesting point.
And I used to think that as well. And I remember actually listening to the early stuff. It's good. And a lot of the early stuff is just as innovative in certain ways of what they were doing in their early work up through Hard Day's Night and down to. So, but you always look, it's just the root of it being guys not liking women enjoying themselves, which is weird. It's kind of sad, right?
I remember when I was growing up,
how much
men were like furiously against female singers. Like it was like, oh my God, there was like no worse sin that you could commit than being a female singer, particularly if you were in a band and did not play an instrument. Thank you, person who totally agrees with me about Clockwork Orange, Mimi. I don't like it. But no, men were awful about female singers because that's what I did. And I actually had way more music training than they did. I probably played more musical instruments, but they'd be like, just absolutely horrible about it. Like, ugh, I hate female singers because no matter what, if a woman sings a song, it's for women, not men. Except for Betty Davis eyes, apparently. Men really like that. Straight men fucking love Betty Davis eyes. That is one thing I have learned from karaoke. I don't get it, but that is a weird crowd pleaser. It's like when I found out that every dude was secretly in love with Alyssa Milano, and I'm like, why did I not work this more? But
she took over Charmed for a reason. She was
no, yeah.
But yeah, it's the Clockwork Orange. It reminds me of how, I mean, not everything ages well or was good at the time, and it was dated. And a lot of the like, obviously, I would not make a movie like that now. That doesn't mean I was a horrible person for enjoying it as a 19-year-old. And I have memories of seeing it and being excited of seeing it. And same with like certain Tarantino films and stuff like that. And what I've found is that people have trouble. It has to have been good, and it's now good now. It can't just be like, okay, you enjoyed this at the time. It's kind of bad with what we know now. It doesn't mean that you are homophobic or transphobic, that you might have enjoyed this that had something really kind of offensive in it. We've just accepted you've grown. And so what occurred was, so a writer I really respect, Ken Levine, he wrote for Cheers and MASH. And so someone on his blog had asked, oh, wow, I just saw recently an episode where the character Henry Blake leaves MASH. And as he's leaving, his badass move is to grab Margaret Houlihan, Major Houlihan, played by Laura Swit, and forcibly himself on her. He kisses her. And that's the cool, And that is a normal human reaction. That character is treated even worse in the movie, where she's literally sexually humiliated. It's like I could never watch that movie again. It's just a really.
I've never seen it. Which is
you would particularly be horrified by the scene. So I won't describe it as pretty disgusting. But for this particular, Levine was commenting on a TV show, and his thing was, again, because he's anti-Trump, he's considered himself a liberal, but he's a 70-year-old white guy. So of course, much like as you've written about Bill Maher, these guys were like, well, Trump is bad, but you know what's almost as worse, almost as bad, if not worse, is wokeism. So he's like, his sense is that everyone's too woke. It's ruining comedy. It's ruining and
Well, it's primarily, I think it's like very much rooted in everything is not geared to me
yes,
anymore. And it was good when it was geared to me. It is bad and trashy when it is geared to others. It's high art if it's for me, low art if it's for other people.
And what was disappointing was he says of like, well, we made this about the woke sensibilities of time. There's a period piece. It's like, okay, MASH is not a period piece.
Yeah.
It was set in 1951. It reflected the sexual policies of the times. You treated women like crap on the show.
Yeah.
But Alan Alda's character was overtly woke, aside from having very 70s hair that I admired as a kid. But
I have always found Alan Alda quite dreamy.
Yeah, there's an episode where he refused to use the racial epithet that the sainted John McCain was still using for Koreans. There was points where he would say, I don't use that word, and he would miss casual racism. There's episodes where he and a trapper, go after guys who are racist, and he go after a captain. There's times of moments where he is clearly not a typical 1950s white man, even if we're liberal at the time. He is clearly what the 70s would consider a very socially, racially progressive liberal. But of course, the backlash, especially amongst white liberals towards white women of authority, was still significant. So you would not be overtly racist in shows that period, but you would be hella misogynistic in those shows, especially for white men. If you go back and look at them in movies as well. I mean, obviously the Nurse Ratched thing from Cuckoo's Nest, but there was a constant sense of women in authority were to be sexually humiliated or dominated, like for instance. And of course the line, it was like, well, essentially, because Margaret's character had a healthy sexual appetite, she essentially would have enjoyed this random guy, which is horrific. One of those things of just like, and it's often as
that sounds very unpleasant.
People will express something that you will be shocked by, even you almost hit your own bubble of thinking like, okay, well, no, really? You just said that just because someone enjoys sex, they would enjoy without their consent a different. I thought that's like a Betamax argument. Like what? Like we're still doing, like you're still making this point. That's like horrific. But I mean, apparently so. Like people are still presuming that. I mean, in the show's world, Margaret hated Henry. She did not like or respect this guy, so clearly did not welcome this. And he had no respect for her. The whole point of the scene was to dominate. This is something I've seen. So it's fine to be like, look, no one wants to cancel MASH. No one wants to pull, I'm not saying pull that episode, but why can't this guy just say, look, we were doing our best at the time. We were wrong, obviously. I look at this as terrible. But when you say like woke sensibilities, you're sort of implying that this is sort of a recent thing. And that it was somehow right at the time, that audiences were understood not to make an issue of it, like, and that's often with sexual.
There also wasn't social media. Like part of the a lot of the reason we've had a lot of like fast social change is because now people can be heard. It's not just like, oh, me and my mom talking at the kitchen table about like actual problems in the world. They can actually hear us. Like I, when I was little, we'd talk about, media that was problematic. Before I watched certain old movies, my mom would explain things to me. She would also explain to me why I couldn't watch certain movies. Generally it was more violence oriented, but you're hearing from people more now, and you're hearing from people that you weren't necessarily listening to before when you were making MASH or making All in the Family, I love All in the Family. I've seen, I think that Norman Lear was like awesome in a lot of ways. not everything has to be forever, and not everything has to be specifically directed towards white men
Oh yeah.
forever.
Well, yeah. I mean, certain things would be now we could tell our own stories, and now we could kind of
Yeah,
women kind of tell their own stories now. And Susan Harris, of course, is great. I mean, some of her, obviously the sexual politics of Soap, which I loved. Certain gay themes
my
in that.
dad's friend wrote for that. Oh, but,
Sorry.
I was like, my dad's friend wrote for Soap, actually.
Oh yeah,
Or,
Soap.
yeah.
One of my the first. I was probably too young to be staying up late and watching soap reruns after Taxi during summers and stuff like that. But I, yeah, loved Soap, and a lot of my sense of humor is from that. And of course, Susan Harris later did Golden Girls, which
Yeah.
really good. I mean, I
Oh,
think
it's my all-time favorite, obviously.
it just really.
I'm a Dorothy. In case anyone was, I mean, I feel like I'm like a Dorothy with a Blanche Rising.
You're not as like hardcore. Like she'll cut you to shreds. You're very.
I mean,
I was afraid of you and I adore Dorothy, but
I do have a very deep voice, though, as several commenters have noticed. When we first started this, there were several people being like, "Oh, I didn't expect her voice to be that deep," and I'm like, "Is it?"
Probably compared.
And
to
I got all paranoid. What are you? Which Golden Girl are you?
I'm from the South, so maybe I should say Blanche, but maybe Sophia. I don't know. I guess we're always with Dorothy because she is such a the humor. I mean, you just love the humor and the biting wit, and just like she also shares.
I'd say you're Dorothy / Rose because you have a way higher opinion of people than I do.
I think everyone, including my wife, is surprised by that statement that I have a very high opinion of people. But
I mean, you have like higher expectations for people to not be shitty. Yeah. I think.
Yeah, I'm generally more.
You're more surprised by it when it happens. I'm like, no, people are terrible.
But yeah, it's yeah. That why can't we just sort of accept that sort of thing? It is not forever. Certain things do age poorly. It can be changed. I mean, Lindy West had written about how often when you're laughing about that joke, it's okay, but remember that often it's reflecting our general treatment of people of that time. So a lot of what it's not necessarily even just a joke, and if you enjoy the non-consensual touching jokes, I don't think you should in math, but the situation for women in the early 70s was still not great, still not getting your own credit.
They still couldn't have their own credit cards, so
let's maybe
that was a problem.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, but I think it's also that sense of like, he's expressed this as well. He's one of the writers who Ken Levine, he hates where he will say, oh, well, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler are brilliant and Maya Rudolph sucks. And if anyone might push back at, well, why do you think, it will, well, I'm not, he gets because the worst things ever is to imply anyone's racially insensitive. So it's clearly objectively suck. And that happens a lot when critics, similar to the guy who was talking about Turning Red, someone was like, why can't I just not like Black Panther without being a racist issue? And I remember I wrote a bad review about Black Panther, and because it was a whole big thing at the time, everyone was criticizing me. And I think it goes back to our first thing about thinking about what you write. If there's a huge cultural moment, if there was a huge cultural moment centered around, and Wonder Woman might be a good example of this. Is my voice really necessary? But okay, exactly, I have the Wonder Woman review. I'm the only one, apparently. Let's say I'm the only one who could do it. Isn't it okay to say, let me recognize that, here's some positives about this, that this is happening, and here's this huge cultural moment? Or do I really need to crap on it? Or same with Captain Marvel, can I at least recognize that, wow, a lot of people especially in Wonder Woman's case, half the population seems to be into
Yeah,
something I'm not. Maybe I should recognize that, but that tends to not. It tends to be very frustrating for a lot of men when things aren't geared towards them. It can't just be
yeah.
like, well, why can't I just fundamentally not like this thing without it being a backlash or something, which is sort of silly. Like,
Like you can, but you can also just like not like be like, you know what really needs to be centered right here is my opinion about how this is shit. Like that is, I think, the issue. I will say, and I was thinking this earlier, I do think that like a large part of the reason why you have like a lot of these people like Barry Weiss and the college girl, the college debate girl and everything. You know, quite frankly, a lot of obnoxious white women complaining about cancel culture and censorship. And I think a very large part of that is that, you know, it's sort of this whole competing issue because, you know, we were raised by, you know, sort of like feminist ladies for the most part who were like, make sure your voice is heard. And, you know, because, you know, men were going to talk over you and everything. And so you end up becoming like a very sort of like forceful person and forceful personality. And I raise my hand in class and because I'm not doing the reviving Ophelia thing. And, you know, there was a lot of, you know, not like sort of social education geared towards um, women in general.
hmm,
Um, being like, hey, you have to like speak up and you can't like let boys talk over you. And I think that a lot of what has happened is that those women are like, well, I should do that in all circumstances, including, you know, I should talk over, you know, people of color, other, you know, like other women, um, everything in general, because that's
well,
who I
sort of
am now.
men are, well, isn't it kind of, well, men are assholes. And
Yeah.
if the thing is sort of like, oh, ladies, be like assholes, that's not
Yeah.
necessarily best advice. And I think it was always, again, going back to Bell Hooks, which was a light bulbing for me when she had said, you know, self actualization is not feminism. So, in certain ways, like
Yeah.
if feminism is about having the same power or same aggressiveness or same whatever, which are toxic male traits, I don't think that men
Yeah.
inherently have those traits. I might say in light. I'm obviously joking when I say men are assholes. I don't believe that's an inherent
Yeah.
issue. But I
I
think
do.
evidence of
No.
like
I'm
it's sort of
kidding. I'm totally
like
kidding. I'm like
dominate dominate
somewhat kidding.
not take. So yeah, and to your point, I mean, I don't want to mind read for this person. It did seem as if the angel devil, not to say the woman is an angel, but again, the idea of if there's a stereotype that women are more inclined to be able intuitive to read social cues and read certain things like that,
Mhm.
part of her was getting that. People were uncomfortable with what I'm saying, but then it was like what you were perhaps saying about perhaps a kind of different feminism saying, no, 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 don't listen to that. That's holding you back. Be aggressive
Yes.
and own that space and just steamroll them, ignore the fact that they are upset is unfortunate because the idea is
Yeah.
like, well, you should be kind of like and gear your and I always make this when people are afraid of talking about the one guy in the Atlantic, because the Atlantic seems to have a whole thread on this. The writer Elizabeth Spears says she's been trying to pitch for years now of like cancel
Fires. Sorry.
fire. Has been trying for years now of like there isn't a cancel culture thing, and there will inevitably be. Well, we're not interested. We apparently have a beat of like people whining about cancel culture, but this guy was sort of doing this whole thing of like, I don't know if you're saying professional ramifications. It's like, okay, well, if you actually understood the history of some of the of certain heroes that a lot of men have, so
Mhm.
Pryor, Andy Kaufman, whatever, their careers were often up in flames. So
Yeah.
they it wasn't and
There
often
was a whole ass movie about it. Andy Kaufman. Like,
often you only like they were recognized perhaps as geniuses later, but certainly Richard Pryor was not cast in Blazing Saddles for a reason instead of
yeah.
like there are certain ways of like this idea that I want to be Lenny Bruce, but with Tom Hanks's success or Tom
And
Cruise's
also Lenny Bruce got weird
possible.
later.
Yeah, yeah, and he
Like he
was.
ended up like, just sort of like going to places and not telling jokes, just like reading off his arrest record, according to my mom. Like
Yeah,
I
I don't
don't
know
know
if
if
you've
she
seen it,
documented or she just saw it. I don't know like what the deal with that was.
but Dustin
Um,
Hoffman film Lenny, directed by Bob Fosse, and there's no dancing.
yeah,
I was like, I was watching the whole thing. It's like, where's the dancing? There's no dancing, but it's very good.
so rude.
But Lenny has that
It's like
about
when
the
all these Broadway people are on Law and Order, and you're like, why are you not singing and dancing?
yes, we never got our Briscoe and Green
Yes,
musical. I mean, that just seemed like such a tease. Like, come on, it's right there.
it
Um,
was so obvious. I feel like Green really, really um, needs. Sorry, I got distracted by that comment, and I will address it in a second. But I would like him to sing more, and I'm very sad that he never got his Marvin Gaye biopic. He should have had it. He has a beautiful voice, and I love him.
yes,
Tom
I guess.
Collins. I'm drinking a Tom Collins right now, even.
Yeah, our fellow Wonkette, Michael Moore, mentioned how what you were
Yeah.
describing was not like J.K. Rowling, who's now decided to having, I don't know, you made
Yeah.
$1 billion by creating this fantastic world everyone tended to enjoy. I was kind of never as into Harry
I
Potter.
really liked Harry Potter. I see
But
that.
it's a beautiful thing that people were into, and it's awesome. I remember, families were reading together. As a nerd, I thought that was great. Like when
Yeah.
those were coming
I actually
out.
bought it to get my sister into reading. And then I read them all myself while I was working at Afterthoughts, piercing baby ears.
So
Um,
yeah, so how evil or effed up do you have to be to then like I just want to really focus my career on bullying a marginalized community, and that's what I want people to know me as,
yeah,
just
it's
like
astounding.
throw it
It's
away and be
astounding.
known as this wonderful, as having created this wonderful thing, and instead you're just bully. Like, I guess she feels it's important for her to do this, but she's like, it is horrible, especially the use of her privilege and the
Yeah,
uh women I know who are trans who
yeah,
it you know it meant so much to them, and I think
yeah.
if
Well,
I'm a
because so much of the series was about acceptance and, accept of fat people. It was really, really
this is very
not okay in that
the
area.
and there was obviously a lot of, in retrospect, some racist stuff. The
Yeah. Cho Chang, which was
like
so
that's like
ridiculous.
I can't be
Like,
bothered to come up with a name. Let's see.
it's a
Hermione
Korean last name
Granger,
with like a
Hermione.
Chinese last name, and we'll just combine them, and that's cool. Like,
I'm out of names. I did Hermione
yeah,
Granger. I did Voldemort. I did cool name. Let me see. And then of course the weird anti-Semitism and perhaps racism of like how it was some weird stuff there. But again, everything's weird and
yeah,
everything sometimes dates poorly. But my God, why like she's just a
like why would you set your entire career on fire like this? But apparently it's the hip thing to do. For British ladies of a certain type, I don't know. Um, now she's doing the whole like, you know, moving in towards the whole like the left me um
so
type
that's
stuff, complaining that
that's what
labor is
they
too,
say. That's
which
what
like they're
they
not.
say, right? Like the left me. Like Bill Maher said this, and others like this was what I believed, and then suddenly it's no longer this, and so
Like that's the whole point.
it's
Like the
it's
whole point of
progressive.
being progressive is that like,
It's going to be growth. It's
yeah,
not like
conservatives where everything stays the same. Like that's
so
so you've
maybe
got
you're
one thing.
all along. It's like it's growth, and now
Conservatism is where everything stays the same. That's the whole point of that. Um, Progressivism, like, or, left leaning beliefs, things are supposed to change with the times. Like, that's the whole point of everything. Like, it's not like, oh, perfect, we got it. We're all set. We figured this out in the 70s. Everything is perfect now. Let's stay this way forever. Um,
uh, I
no.
I that reminds me of some other point I have to make about politically, but I do want to address a couple comments here. Ghostbusters with the lady Ghostbuster, the reaction to that
Yeah,
was insane. I think there were issues with the film, 'cause that's my opinion, but compared to the original
I
that
actually
was
liked
worth
it.
examining. But yeah, to me, it was like people enjoy it. Like, why I don't, if you want to ask me to do a breakdown of why, my general sense was that what I liked about the original Ghostbusters was that it was in a certain way, and this is very tough with remakes, it was a sort of kind of scary movie that then it was in this, and this was
Oh, I
very
was absolutely very, very scared of Ghostbusters, especially the whole like I am the keymaster thing. Did not that was scary.
but this was very different, which is fine. But like again,
Yeah.
that becomes the whole thing of like no one able to recognize a moment and like, well, people really enjoy this, and these are
Yeah.
a lot of women who are great comedic actors who my wife was very excited when it came out. She saw it with a friend of hers. It was like, why do you want to crap on that? I don't get it.
Yeah.
And then finally, the Michael mentions how the Flash had an episode. I remember it was because a lot of cast members from Glee were on the Flash CW show. So
Oh,
he did a
yes.
few
I did
musical.
not know that.
Supergirl was on, and so there's
Oh, I
one where
did know that. Yeah, I
oh,
did not care for her on Glee, but apparently you say she is very good on this show. We had this discussion before.
yes, Melissa
Yes, I watched Glee. I don't.
is wonderful. I was never a fan of Glee. I don't know. I think I was perhaps um never a fan of Leah DiMichele, who I think a lot of people are not. But I
I think that she is a bad person. I did think that she had an amazing voice, but I'm also a very big Barbara Streisand fan. So,
yes, as am I. And she did not get the I think she did not get the funny girl or whatever, which is the
yeah, no, the other girl got what's her face? I can't think of
I don't know. It's a doomed part. I feel like if you're it's Barbara Streisand. I mean,
yeah.
I
I
think
don't think there needs to be another funny girl, quite frankly. I think the movie is perfect.
yeah, I think it's certainly possible, but I feel like it's kind of hard. It's just like it's Barbara Streisand. Maybe in another 100 years.
Beanie Feldman.
Oh yes, she's great. She was Monica Lewinsky, as I recall.
Yeah.
Um, the but there one of that duet episode with the geek class. There was also Victor Garber and Giselle Martin were a couple gangsters, but also a couple, and they sang, and it was really cool. Um, but back to your sense of about progressivism and politics, I think there's been only one to touch on, and I was reading New York Times had a whole article about the Democratic reset because they're bracing for losses, and something I was seeing online, and it's one of those things I just don't. So I'm not calling out the people who make these comments, but it was just something about this lecturing idea of all Democrats need to do is point out the fact that Republicans are evil because that's self-evident, and then that's enough to just vote, which it just isn't. If it was kind of like I have I
It would
would
be
love
super great if it was.
my bean sprout restaurant should fundamentally, Uncle Steven's bean sprouts should automatically be defeating McDonald's because we all know
Yes.
McDonald's is crap. People saw that kind of weird.
Beans are healthy.
Like, why should I advertise? It's obvious, and and you must want people to die. Why should I
And if you advertise, that's like selling out, isn't it? Kind of.
why should
Like,
I deign to have Happy Meals to cater to kids?
yeah.
Kids didn't know, and kids aren't a reliable audience. I'm not going to have the Happy Meals, and so why everyone understands. Of course, I'm going to go bankrupt. Like, and this idea that it's just enough. It's like, well, if that wasn't, Republicans have been terrible forever, and there are elections where if you don't sell Democratic policies or sell a Democratic candidate, you lose. And Republicans were just as bad in 2010. 2010 is a very good example. The Tea Party route. We're getting sort of more
Yeah.
extreme of that now. And so whenever someone tweets that, it's just so I don't know how to respond to it. It's just so weird of just like, well, this party's terrible. and you should vote for harm reduction. It's like, I don't think a single
I
mom.
love harm reduction. Harm reduction is my favorite. I was yelling about it earlier today. At the same time, if you can do more than harm reduction, I actually feel like that sort of mindset is almost more against it almost is more in line with the people who are against harm reduction, because wouldn't it be super great if we made fentanyl strips outlawed and then no one did any cocaine or any other drugs that are laced with fentanyl? Because you're counting on the world being better than it actually is. And I think one thing that I very much see is, so like back in the 90s when people were, and early 2000s when people would be like, oh, I only really like their first album, like the one before they sold out.
Yeah,
Um,
you want to be
you know,
special.
well, it was this whole thing where it was like, very cool to hate pop music. That it was very not cool to like pop music. And that was very much a thing. And it was also quite racist.
Yeah,
That,
racist or misogynistic, but generally a lot of homophobia. It's very
yeah,
not to
disco,
derail, but
anything that's like popular is like bad and low art and stupid.
oh yeah.
But my cool indie rock, that's, if people had real taste, they'd be listening to what I listen to.
Well, Bill
Or,
would go on his whole tirade against George Michael and how that was somehow the end of civilization. I love Bill Hicks, but it was
I
like,
love George Michael.
yeah, it felt like a very kind of like he's not,
Yeah.
not even he's either is homophobic or whatever the root of that is to me, because his music's fun. If you don't like this, fine. If you're a stiff white guy who
I mean,
doesn't
you have no soul, but like,
dance, and frankly, you have no soul. If you can't be moved by kissing a
yeah,
fool, if you if that doesn't, it's not your thing. But to view it as like the dumbing down of culture,
yeah,
me, it's just like you have to make something that someone else's enjoy. To me, it has to be a very high. Like I'm gonna be like, okay, dwarf tossing is that's fundamentally bad. I don't care if you're enjoying that. I
yeah.
gotta shut that down. I'm sorry. Like this, don't do this. This is what's wrong with you people. But everything else, I'm generally speaking, like
Yeah.
you like Billy Ray Cyrus, you like whatever. I don't.
Yeah.
You like Robin Thicke.
Oh, remember? Oh, my favorite from that era was, I like all music except country and rap.
Yes,
And
I
I was
used
like,
to do that
oh,
all
so
the
you're like,
time. Was that
just so you
going on?
know, I'm very worldly and I hate Black people and poor people. So I'm very classy.
It was like that was used to be, especially both there, and it was like on online dating for the longest. It was just
Yeah.
like literally just your line just be
Yeah.
a photo of like, I hate Black people and poor
It really, like, I mean, I'm sorry, it kind of,
all music
like,
except
people thought this was like just the thing to say. Also, that when those people were also, I'm not religious, but if I were, I'd be a Buddhist. And they would not have been a Buddhist. Um, they would not have been there. They like, no, they were not Zen.
yes.
They were liars, is what they were. But there's this whole like, I feel like that idea, that whole like, oh no, we don't want to do like, try to do things to like attract people. They should just come to us because of how they have good taste and want to,
Mhm.
be the people who have good taste like us.
Yeah.
It's very much that same vibe.
Well,
To me.
it's just a weird concept. So, and the get out the vote aspect of it is also strange. And obviously, I don't expect this from people on Twitter. But like I remember this one guy saying, whenever someone would say, I don't really know, I don't feel motivated to vote right now, and yes, and God forbid if you do your civic responsibility and don't do that, or if someone would just be like, they're not saying they're not going to vote, they're just saying, I don't see how Democrats are making a compelling argument to
Yeah.
vote, because Democrats in 2020 voted for Biden and Harris, not Manchin Cinema. The Manchin Cinema ticket probably is not a very successful ticket. Like they only have power through a weird thing in the Senate.
Yeah.
So basically saying that what Democrats could achieve, and even when they say, well, what about the judges and whatever? Sure, but what I would always counter is, okay, well, Manchin Cinema 2024, how many states do you lose there or whatever? Because they're not very popular global, and nationwide. But whenever people would explain any sort of issues with that, it would just be like you're depressing somehow turnout if you're 5 or 12 followers that you're reading this
Not
to.
a
And
secret.
yeah, exactly. And one lady responded to this one guy, I think Will Stansel or something. I don't agree from everything, but this one, she was like, "Why don't you just go vote for Republicans like your mommy and daddy?" And it's like, oh, wow, that's really mean. Like, how was that effective? Like, if you want him to vote for Republicans, because that's or not, and why
Yeah.
insulting him? Also, the uh the idea, the presumption. So, like, if someone said it to you, your family was not, your mom, yeah, is
No, I'm like a full-on red diaper baby, at least
yeah. So
from
that
my
would
mom.
be like, okay, well, that's quite progressive to presume based on, but I don't I just don't get that. Like, you need to have, but there's this whole twisted perception that's wrong in history, that Republicans behave. That's what a lot of
Yeah.
will say. Well, Republicans don't.
Prince fall in line. Yeah.
There's
They
no
absolutely do not.
like, and there's no incrementalism. So when we talked about Ginny Thomas, she was part of that right wing wave of like, we're done with, Ford isn't evil enough. We want Reagan, and we want someone that's going
Mhm.
to back down the Great Society, and that's what they got. And he
Yeah.
wouldn't settle for anyone. And there were people probably, I mean, that it was not. That's what needs to be understood. People were probably saying like, "Look, Reagan's a little conservative, like especially the religious stuff. Why don't we?" They were probably pushing for a more moderate candidate. They were part of that
Yeah.
wave one, and when people question Democratic leadership and it becomes very controversial, everyone's like, "How dare you criticize um, Clyburn or Pelosi or Steiny?" And I'm like, "Hey, Hoyer." It's like, it's not just that. It's like what we talk about when you look about a
So,
functioning.
okay, hold on. Here's the thing, though. They say like, "Oh, you can't criticize it," but they criticize Democrats all the time. Those exact people do lots of criticizing of Democrats, just the ones that they don't like.
Those aren't real Democrats. That's a true Scotsman thing. But the point is
Yeah.
like idea of like, well, if Republicans, it's a party that is for good or for ill, and one could say from successful rate good. Like John Boehner is still not he's not the House leader. He got
Yeah.
ran out of the rail because he failed to deliver. And he was like, look, I can't make Obama overturn, like I don't, he's the president right now. Even if we've passed multiple bills to
Mhm.
overturn the Affordable Care Act. He's not gonna sign it. He'll veto it. But they said force it, shut down the government, do whatever it takes, and he got
Yeah.
forced out. Paul Ryan would have probably been forced out. So this is clearly a party that leadership understands it has to deliver. And so this
Yeah.
idea that we can have, 90-year-old leaders without any ramification for success, or if you don't get that, you don't understand all they deliver. And I'm not making the ageist claim there's a problem with them because of their age, or that I have an issue personally with any. I'm just saying like this argument that Republicans are,
Harley and Maxine Waters are two of my faves. So
I mean, but this argument that they're a more well-behaved party, that
yeah.
Republicans are disciplined, when all evidence is that they respond. The reason you get Ted Cruz in a tractor trailer is because, the convoy is because there's like whatever our base do, we feed our base constantly. We are over, we love these guys. We don't try to veer towards the center. So it's strange. It's just kind of this idea of like, I'm sharing the secret, or it's just like this belief that like the same system will work, of like veering to the system, um, despite saying you should vote for Democrats because Republicans are evil. Fine, but you're not making that affirmative argument. You're building bridges literally with Republicans. And there's an article in the Times where, one Hakeem Jeffries, to his credit, does say we care about people. They don't. But then this a moderate guy is like saying, well, Ukraine is the opportunity. We're all together now. And that's what people want to see is everyone's working together. It's like, okay, well, those are two separate messages.
Yeah.
Republicans have a very clear message.
Well, I
Democrats
think the people, I'm not playing devil's advocate here, but those people are like, well, that's because, you know, Republicans do what they want, but, you know, Democrats govern for everyone. They govern. And I'm like, well, clearly Republicans don't see it that way, or else they would vote for you.
Now, they seem to be they seem to be fine with what's happening. And again, a lot of the argument, the idea that, oh no, those white supremacist Democrats, Republicans, which Democrats don't affirmatively make that argument. They're very afraid to, because they keep saying, I don't want to alienate the swing voters or whatever. But that seems to be, to me, slightly disingenuous, because you're making an argument towards, minorities, marginalized community, like LGBT community, all these people who are being actively harmed right now. And to me, if you're basically saying, well, you've what else can you do? I'm sorry that they're banning abortions everywhere and having fugitive uterus acts, Robyn, but what more? You can't go anywhere else. It's like a really offensive thing, because ultimately, when you are in danger, you want someone to have say it's not like you have nowhere else to go. It has to be more of like, here's how I'm going to fight for you. Because often when you're just trying to keep your head above water, you want to feel that it's human nature. People aren't Vulcans. They're going to vote for a sense of, this vote is going to fundamentally change something, not like it's going to.
People like to feel like what they do matters. And the irony is that, like, Democrats have so much more ability to invoke that in people. And they don't, because they don't want activism, but at the same time, like, people like activism. People like feeling like they're doing something. That's why the Republican people are all like, yeah, we have our, stupid trucker convoy. That makes us feel like we're doing something. People like to feel like they're doing something. Honestly, if you want loyalty from someone, get them to do a favor for you rather than you doing a favor for them. It's like this weird human nature thing. When people think that they're, doing something and making a difference, and, they are more likely to develop loyalty to people, and possibly political parties. Where it's like, oh, well, nothing really matters, and we're just going to sort of like try and keep bad stuff from happening.
Well, that's the argument. If the coalition, the Democratic, it's a tough coalition, Democratic Party, because the GOP's coalition is very clearly white cis supremacist rule. So like what DeSantis is doing, what they're happening in Texas, this has been the long-term agenda for a while. That's what they want. It's not a distraction. That is the kitchen table issue for those voters, for those people, and they're delivering. And now for Democrats, the idea is that they want, there's a limit to how much they want to say that we are the party of people of color. When people get abortions, and
because they still want to appeal to that, white male thing, because they're still the default.
And what's strange though is that there's a limit to how they will make. So it's a white leftist, so this white suburban guy, they will comprehend. It's like, oh, I can't actually make the all Republicans or white supremacists terrible argument to that guy. I will have to say, oh, well, here's this centrist policy. We're going to deal with inflation, and that'll get you to come along with us. Whereas if you were to dare suggest that, okay, well, yeah, like, why should some white straight kid, young, potentially left-leaning person might not be voting for the issue, but you could get that person to vote for your issue with overturning student loan debt, or doing, whatever is a liberal economic thing, then it's horrific.
Well, I think that people view that as sort of like selling out.
Yeah, but they will sell out to the Bill Maher's, when Bill Maher is like, I think you wrote about this, like, well, we need to agree. Why don't we just agree with it's not worth the dignity of these trans people is not worth defending, essentially what he argued. It was like,
Yeah.
just, like whatever, like, just who cares? As DeSantis wrote, like,
Let's just let them have this one.
yeah, because they'll never stop. And you're saying that someone's identity is inherently, as DeSantis wrote, a sexual issues like transgenderism, which is just like, well, no, it's just that people exist. It is that whole concept of that is both something I've seen on the left and the right, because a big thing in Portland would be the idea of like racism doesn't happen if you just don't talk about race. Don't acknowledge, even though kids
Yeah.
notice people are different. Kids notice that someone has two parents who are the same sex or different, and they notice that people have different skin colors. And
or if they dress weird and have weird hair.
Yeah, and I remember, it's like a 4 or 5-year-old. I was whenever, and she was like aware that I probably because I was the first Black person seen, my skin color was different, and when she acknowledged it, her parents were like, as if she was horrified or apologetic, and it's like, well, apologize when they make a value judgment. When it's like you are different and that's bad, as opposed to are gonna note, that's a fine thing to do. And so that's sort of what they want, as you've written about. They resent the idea of kids essentially learning not to place a value judgment on people being different, because ultimately they know differences, but if they never get them normalized, they start to associate that differences are wrong. And that gets
or bad, or
in the media. So as decent kids of our generation, if you don't, what you see on TV is the gag of, transphobic humor, homophobic humor. Gay people are inherently funny to be ridiculed.
Yeah.
And universal truth, you're going to become homophobic. And so what they're trying to prevent is normalcy. And to me, it's never about the idea. It's so twisted when they talk about, no one, as you wrote, is talking about teaching kids how to fuck. It's not about that. What they don't want is the idea that you and another woman or me and another man are parents, a family, something normal. I'm a teacher. There's not anything inherent.
Yeah, because they want it to be a weird sexual fetish. Like some dude messaged me on Twitter. He's like, no, it's all they're perverts. It's all sexual. I'm like, no, it actually isn't. Like, no. And that's really like a you problem, as my friend Ashley Nicole Black said. Like if that's, if people are like, oh, this person has two dads, and the first thing that you do is say, oh, I can't stop picturing them fucking, then as she said, that is a you problem. Like that's not on the people who are just like existing. If I, meet people like anyone and I immediately picture them fucking, that is something that is in my head. That's not their fault. Unless they're really, really attractive.
When people are drawing photos of their parents, they're just modeling parents. Yeah. Kids find romance or sex at a certain age somewhat grotesque, and they don't want to think about it, and so it's not
boy cooties.
Yes, I think parents are obsessed with something that has been documented that kids aren't that obsessed with, and that they should just pull back from, and it's like fine. But yeah, it's like that's why they hate the Hallmark movies or hate anything that shows like a family celebrating Christmas and it's a same-sex couple, because it is not being presented as it's not presented as this character is a smoker. Like how Buffy used to deal with smoking, where the only people who smoked were demons, so they're evil. If you're evil, you could smoke. Whereas Spike suddenly stopped smoking when he got a soul, which is just like, well, if he enjoyed smoking before, he's still dead. He could still smoke.
Like, if you're dead, you can smoke all you want.
Yeah, like, well, also, I mean, he's no longer smoking.
If your plane crashes in the middle of the field, I don't know if you saw that, but I tweeted from the plane. There was a drawing where it's like, if your plane crashes and you're getting off in the middle of a field, you still can't have a cigarette. And I was like, there's a time.
Wait a minute. Well,
like, if you're reenacting Lost, go ahead and have a cigarette. If you're dead, go ahead. Like, you're not going to get cancer.
Maybe they're afraid you'll blow up the.
Yes, I'm aware of that, but like you could walk pretty far.
Just walk in the distance. Also, you're not going to survive that landing, so go ahead, light them if you got them.
Yeah, smoking if you got them. Yeah.
But, I do think that the Democrats really. The problem is sort of like we want to tell the marginalized, please come back, please show up to vote for us because your life depends on it. How could you possibly sit it out? But we can't actually make that the marquee issue of this election. It has to now be for the people who aren't at risk in these ways. We have to.
We're secret after school friends.
Yeah,
exactly. I can't talk to you in school, but I'm going to come over to your house and play afterwards. Just don't tell anyone because we're secret friends.
I don't see how that fundamentally works. That this argument has to be like these folks are out to. They're torturing children. They're children. They're torturing children. They're trying to lock away families or whatever. There was an article in Mother Jones about how Ken Paxton was invited. One guy who has a trans child invited Ken Paxton to home. He was nice, and his wife was nice. It didn't misgender the child. Spoiler alert: these people apparently never met Republicans before, so they were very nice and whatever. And they thought that they'd made their like very special episode moment, right? And he was going to go and no longer be evil. And you think, can you imagine what occurred afterward, Robyn? He actually went and passed this awful, terrible bill because, like, no, he's evil, and he's right, but he's still evil. So that's kind of what happened, and
they couldn't tell because he wasn't wearing green.
He wasn't wearing a green. He was like, oh, he showed up in white, and he was very polite, or red and blue, like Clark Kent.
Yeah.
And so, we need to just kind of come right out and say this is what is at stake. But I feel like that's the challenge right now because I think Republicans are very clear about what this election is about, and they're coming after us. And I think Democrats are kind of like, the secret out of school friends is classic. It's like, well, we've got you, but we need to appeal to. Honestly, we're going to like do some. We're going to have a better all these kitchen table issues that they want to try to. It's like I guess. But someone needs to say like this is a moral issue. We're going out, and it is tougher because often the people who have the most skin in the game aren't necessarily the leadership. So it winds up kind of like a game of telephone, right? Like I hear that people, it's very tough for them. So we shall see. I mean, I've voted for Democrats for almost 30 years now, and I voted for them when they've lost, and I voted for them when they won. So my vote.
I have for 6 years now. Here. Straight. I have said this before. I voted straight third party, no matter what. Pretty much until Bernie. So. Because I was like, someone's actually talking about the stuff that I care about. That's nice.
Yeah, he got you over to the Democratic Party, so that's whatever. I mean, it was like.
And now I'm annoying people. No.
Somehow your vote.
They're so mad about it. They did not want any of us. Like a lot of people, they're like, no, please, just go back to the Green Party. It's fine. Just don't just please go.
Well, this is actually funny because someone, whenever Kristen Sinema would do something terrible, which is always like she's completely unaware. She's talking about that bipartisan deal, whereas senators from like Rhode Island are talking about, in Arizona they're like passing insane voter suppression acts. She's completely never mentions that. She's only talking about her bipartisan deal. She's only trumpeting what she wants to take credit for, and someone was like, well, this is why I never trust Green Party people. And I'm like, what? I think the problem is not, for one, like her votes are far to the right of how most Green Party people would vote.
Yeah,
Right,
no, that's
defined by their support for the filibuster. And it's like, well, no, but, and the person responded to me, it's like, well, no, Green Party people are just inherently untrustworthy and corrupt. It's like, okay, they're just out to like disrupt the system, and that's what cinema's doing. And it's like, I I mean, the literary critic. I mean, I'm trying to like, as you know, the English teacher, like your interpretation of this novel, like I
yeah.
get your interpretation of this character, but I'm like, okay, so
Well,
is
I
it?
think I get, you know what? I think it's just one of those cases of like really wanting that to be true. And I totally like, I get that. Like they want that to be true. It would be awesome if it were true for them and their narrative. So they're just going to go with it because, you know, who's going to tell them otherwise?
Well,
Uh,
Tulsi Gabbard is the other. She's terrible. I've never been a fan of Tulsi Gabbard's, and someone like, I don't
I
know who
keep saying Gabbard.
Gabbard. Yeah, sorry. And someone had a whole her tweet from like Bernie Sanders has supported her, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
and Bernie, if Bernie had won, she'd be vice president, and now this would be and Russia, Putin would have invaded all of them. I don't know. It was a whole horrible thing. Like we
Well,
can't.
that is a whole.
So it was this whole thing. Like, and when she spoke at CPAC, it was suddenly, we need to talk about Bernie Sanders. That was a response to, I wrote about her speaking at CPAC, and someone was like, we need to talk about Bernie Sanders. Like, why? That led to some, what's the connection? It's like, well, he supported her. And it's like, okay, if you're going to play that game, a lot of people endorse a lot of people who label
Yeah.
to be terrible. I don't like, but again, as you said,
Except he has psychic powers.
he knew all along that she was going to
Yeah.
be, she would have
He
been
knew exactly how this was going to play out. He's a wily old man with psychic powers who can determine these kinds of things way ahead of time. Like people are so weird. They're just so weird. Yeah, no, I will tell you, there's a part of me, I don't know how to say this. It's not that I want to like Tulsi Gabbard, because I do not. I think she's terrible. But I swear to God, there is a part of me that like, I don't know. People get so much more mad at women who like, except
yeah.
for Bernie Sanders. Like Bernie Sanders for some reason is like like he may as well like be a woman for as much as people flip out at him for like are just mad. Like I wish that Tulsi Gabbard sucked less because like
Well, yeah,
people get like all of a sudden get into like the looksism, like they're like, oh well, she's saying that because she looks like this, and I'm like, that's not actually true. I'm not. No, that does not factor
there could be
into
like
that. Like,
they
please
could
stop
be a
making me
wolf
stand up for
chewing
bad
on my
people.
arm or something, like a wolf chewing on my arm, and like someone, a Hillary supporter supposed to be like, let's talk about Bernie Sanders. Like, no, there's a wolf on my arm. It's like, why do you love Bernie? It's like,
Like,
no, it's just I'm sorry, I'm not getting the relevance as to why we need to talk about him right now. And like, well, he has all this influence and power. It's like, what? And it's like, it just becomes it's this weird thing. It's like, look, I did not vote for the guy, but let's move on. But I think that's what Kim's
well,
yeah, yeah,
I think people aren't going to be happy until like everyone collectively agrees that they are correct about like this particular issue,
yes.
which doesn't seem like it should matter that much to me, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting that became the whole discussion. Because, I mean, the point I was actually even making with the CPAC article was that Gabbard was always someone who um, was a frequent guest on Tucker Carlson, and people like, and like, when you look at how Tucker Carlson responds to like to her and to others compared to say AOC, even from the start, and
Yeah.
on certain issues, which is why I think Sanders, and I think some of those Sanders left, liked Gabbard. It was like her issues are very similar, or pretty on the left on those issues, except of course where it came to white Christian. She's obviously her issues with LGBT and others.
Yeah.
So that to me was something that instead of maybe attacking Sanders would be something that I would think after CPAC would be a light bulb moment. But I think there's a lot of people who don't want to even try to defend AOC. But instead of looking at maybe the issue there is, when everyone's like, she's the devil of her Green New Deal, all this was again rooted in a lot of this, the backlash was rooted in what she represented, sort of identity,
Yeah.
quote unquote identity politics, and that type of liberalism more so than the idea that they're scared of her because of socialism. That also became a kind of good racial dodge, which I think people would recognize with the very moderate, very middle of the road Obama. The reaction to him, the polite racist backlash was to say he's a socialist, is going to destroy our way
Yeah.
of life. And I think that's becomes the like, well, no, that's what Carlson doesn't really care about other than how you can connect those policies with some larger kind of
Yeah.
woke ideology or everything. But even now, Republicans are just talking about woke ideology, right? Like that's what's evil and that's everything that's bad about the world. And Trump last night was talking about in South Carolina, people need to be prepared to lay down their life to stop critical race theory, which is
They're so dramatic.
Lay
down your life to prevent this thing that you literally cannot even define. And same thing with the Bill Maher thing, where it's like, well, you have to admit they have a point. They're seeing something. They believe that something is happening, and they're upset about it. Yeah.
There's videotape of Black people being murdered on the streets.
Yeah,
like cops are like it's like we've seen it because we filmed it. We and you can't even do anything about we can't get any sort of police reform, but literally like white people's fifis are leading to. So that is a bit kind of demoralizing. Did you get enough sleep last night with this whole ridiculous daylight savings time?
I did not. I'm confused. This is again why I look like Jack Nicholson in The Witches of Eastwick. I don't do daylight savings time very well. I'm really glad that I only have one day of work before my days off, so that I can sort of get rebalanced, I guess.
It's like a week of jet lag Americans agree to a year.
It's so stupid and bad, and I don't know why we do it.
Sheldon Whitehouse had tweeted like we should have daylight savings time all year round. First, it's like, well, you're a senator. Why are you tweeting like my uncle about we should do this? It's like, well, go.
No, they actually should make a law, and I'm actually surprised that Rhode Island has not been because there's a couple states now that are like, fuck it, we're not doing daylight savings time. I could see Rhode Island deciding to be one of those states.
Well, he wants permanent daylight savings time, which as a parent means that I've got to get my kid up and get him out to school, and it's literally pitch black. They're waiting. That's not a great idea. They probably should do about case by case basis, but really, it's just not good for you physically to have it be dark until almost 9 a.m. And at a certain point, it's like if you try to ever get kids to sleep, even during the summer when there's no school, it's like, look, it's 9:30. I don't care. You need to go to bed. I don't care if it's still light. Go to bed. And I have one parent who they have blackout, the little they're drug addicts or something. Here, put these on.
They got the blackout curtains.
Yes, but that is also bad for your circadian rhythm because you're supposed to kind of gradually.
Oh yeah.
The blackout just screws your head up. So stop fucking with time. That's my final message for tonight.
That's enough for a fan of Doctor Who.
Yes, one time. Yes, well, fixed time. There's only one fixed point of time here.
Here's what I understand. Okay, why not just have one time, and everyone doesn't have to things don't have to exactly correspond to the actual time. Just have why does it have to be, oh, kids go to school at this time? Why can't they just go to school slightly later than that? I don't
Well, because all of this that's rooted around. I mean, unions go crazy, but also
Yeah.
like the
No,
school.
I just like,
It's the whole, but it's the whole thing. I mean, I am I where I live. I don't see the gain. I feel like I would much rather have it be earlier, maybe because I'm middle aged and old and get up pretty early. But I'd rather have my light because you're not saving. You're just sort of it's all a pyramid scheme of time, and
I
that
don't like, I barely understand like what is even going on. I know it has something to do with crops.
that was
Um,
never, that was also not true. That was never. I'll send you the link for the John Oliver who went through all of the stuff. Like cows don't need to know what time it is because cows are morons. This is not about
I really don't understand why we decided that this was a good idea. I do like,
people.
I
Like
like the other daylight savings time where you get to do like, oh, it's like time travel night, and you have a whole night where you like a whole hour where you get to like go and correct whatever mistake you made the year before.
was that a
I
movie hero or something like a?
That was from Pete and Pete.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. That would be
So,
great. I don't know. I would.
and
I
they
would.
called it time travel night.
That would have much to do. All right. Well, thank you again, Robyn. And life.
Thank you, Stephen.
Don't fuck with time. Goodbye, everyone.
You either. No time, no fucking with time.